Hi there, Michael here. In today's video, I'm taking a closer look at Aria Studio by Altitude Audio, a fascinating new software that's changing how we experience audio. If you've been following my channel, you might remember my video on using AirPods Pro 2 as hearing aids for music production. Well, today we're going deeper into personalized audio with what might be a game changer for anyone with hearing loss or for anyone who just wants to have a more balanced audio experience. So let's dive in. Before we get started, a quick heads up. This isn't a sponsored video. I purchased this software with my own money and the developers have no idea that I'm making this video. I just found this software really interesting, especially for those of us working in audio production who might have some hearing loss. So today I'll walk you through both the Aria Studio software and their full-scale hearing test application that works with the AirPods Pro 2 as a calibrated device. But before I do that, a quick shout out to our awesome new channel member, Ben Gregson. Thank you so much for your support. It is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, let's first talk about the full-scale hearing test application. The full-scale hearing test app is available for iPhones as well as Android devices and uses a calibrated hearing device such as the AirPods Pro 2 to deliver a proper hearing assessment right at home. The concept is very simple. The app plays tones at different frequencies and volumes, and you tap when you hear them. What's interesting is how the app tests across a wide frequency range, going beyond what audiologists typically measure. This gives you a more complete picture of your hearing profile, especially important for those of us working with music, where those higher frequencies matter. So let's check out how that looks in practice. Now I'm going to use the full-scale hearing test application on my iPhone, and I'm going to film that through the iPhone mirroring app. That's really the easiest way to get everything on video. Now, the full-scale hearing test application is currently only accessible as a beta version, and that means that you need to first download the TestFlight application, which is Apple's way of giving you access to beta versions of software. If you don't know what it is, there are exact instructions on how to do that on Altitude Audio's website, so it's actually very easy to do. Once you have downloaded TestFlight, you can load in the full-scale application in the beta version. And in order to do a hearing test, really everything that you need to do is just kind of open up the application, and then essentially it will kind of ask you to create an account. I've already done that here, and then essentially we're going to take a new test. It's going to ask me a couple of things for myself, essentially kind of the age that I have and the gender, and then it sort of allows me, or it asks me to prepare the audio for the actual test. So I need to be in a quiet place, obviously. I need to use one of the calibrated devices, and there's a list of devices that you can use. They're kind of written down on the website of Altitude Audio. And then you need to adjust the volume to 100%. And it's actually going to ask you exactly, in case you have not done that yet, to actually increase your volume. That just makes sure that everything is calibrated correctly. So let's say I'm going to use the Apple AirPods. I'm going to click here and say next. And then essentially it asks me what type of AirPods do I have. And I am just kind of selecting the ones that I usually use. Those are the Apple AirPods Pro Generation 2. And then it's asking me to adjust the volume. In my case, I've already done that, so it's at 100%. And it's also asking me to turn off any transparency settings. And if you're using the AirPods as your hearing device, you also need to turn that off. And in my particular case, I've already done that. And let me just continue here. And then it's asking me for a sound check. Now, you're not going to really hear anything because I am not really recording the audio from my iPhone, but it's actually just to make sure that everything is set up correctly. So we're going to press the play button that will play the sound for the right side and then essentially for the left ear, and then essentially everything is okay. Yes, everything is okay. And then I'm ready to start my test. So let's just kind of get that test started. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire test because the entire test once again takes 15 minutes, but just to give you an idea of what is happening. So let's start the test here. And the idea really is that whenever you are hearing a sound, you click on the heard button here, and that will tell the system that you actually heard that sound. Now, you see the frequency here and the volume at which that frequency is played, and I'm going to actually come back to that because that's a little bit of an issue here. But essentially what you need to do is you need to just press the play button, and then whenever you hear something, you press heard. And that will then essentially kind of register that you heard that particular tone, and it will kind of guide you through the process. And it takes, once again, a couple of minutes, and then you are essentially done. Now, once you've completed the test, you will have a test available to you, and you can look at the results. And for those of you who have been following my videos, you know about my hearing problems. And my hearing problems is really a little cookie cutter hearing loss in the mid frequencies, and then an age-related hearing loss in the higher frequencies. And you can actually see that here. So if I'm kind of scrolling down here, you see that here in the range between something like starting at 1 kilohertz up to about 6 kilohertz, my hearing is slightly worse than normal. It's not really that critical. Sometimes this is picked up as a mild hearing loss, sometimes as a moderate hearing loss, sometimes as normal. It really depends on the day. And then obviously I have kind of the age-related hearing loss. I cannot really hear anything above 12.5 kilohertz. Unfortunately, there's really nothing I can do about that once you reached my age. That is not uncommon. I know people my age who have better hearing, but that's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about that, and that's just something I have to deal with. But here you can actually see very, very well that the application is actually testing anything up to 20 kilohertz. Now, I'm not completely sure how accurate the higher frequencies are, but it's at least nice that it tries to do that, because normally if you go to do the audiologist, they will only test up to 8 kilohertz. So it essentially stops here at 8 kilohertz. And then you get more detailed results. Now, so this would be the result that you would normally see from an audiologist. Now, what it then asks you is to purchase the full report. And unfortunately, you actually need the full report in order to get access to the test results that you can then use in your ARIA Studio application on your desktop. And it costs $10. Now, currently, because this is a beta test application, the price is $0, because you are kind of working in this sandbox and it's not really charging you anything. But in the future, when this application becomes commercially available, they will probably charge you for each hearing test. And unfortunately, you need to purchase the full hearing test in order to gain access to the test results in a way that allows you to use them in your ARIA Studio application. Now, once you have completed your test and purchased the extended report, you can then use this button here in order to send the report to your email. And this email will also include the files that you need for your ARIA Studio application on your desktop in order to apply the hearing profile to your listening experience on your desktop. Now, I have to mention something that took me a few attempts to figure out. During the test, the app displays the frequency and volume level is currently testing, and this actually affected my results because I found myself expecting to hear something based on what I was seeing. I had better results when I looked away from the screen and just tapped when I genuinely heard a tone. Another observation, my tinnitus sits right around 12.5 kilohertz, which is exactly where my age-related hearing loss starts. During my first couple of attempts, I was mistaking my tinnitus for actual test tones, which gave me incorrect results. It's fascinating because it seems to confirm that my tinnitus is my brain's attempt to fill in the frequencies that I can no longer hear. Now let's look at the ARIA Studio software itself. This is where the actual magic happens. ARIA Studio takes your hearing test results and creates a personalized audio profile that compensates for your specific hearing loss pattern. So let's have a brief look at how the ARIA Studio application works in practice. Now, in principle, everything is very straightforward. What you have to do is you have to take the calibration files that you got via email and you have to put them into specific directories on your desktop. Unfortunately, there is no input function right now, so you actually have to do that manually. And once you've done that, you can load them into ARIA Studio in order to activate that profile and change your audio according to your particular hearing loss profile. Now, in order to load that in, you need to go to the file section here, and in the file section, wherever you actually put your calibration files, you go to that particular directory. In my particular case, it's profile 1 user default. And there I have the two files that I got through the hearing test application. One is called clean results. One is called raw results. The one that you're supposed to load in is the clean results file. That file will limit the amount of decibels that are added to your hearing, or that are added to the EQ, in order to make sure that nothing goes overboard and nothing goes wrong. But if you are interested in the actual results, in the raw results, you can look at the raw results file profile, and that will show you all the terrible details of your hearing loss. So if you have some very severe hearing loss, you will actually see that there in the clean results file that is limited to a reasonable amount of decibels. Now, the application has a couple of interesting personalization features. So if you go into the effects section here, for example, you can load in certain room ambiences if you want to, so you can actually use that almost like a mix room simulation. There are some changes in the loudness that you can make, and then you also have some possibilities to adjust in the filters or the filter section here. Now, here you see the actual filter that is applied to my particular profile. So this is my terrible hearing loss starting at 12.5 kilohertz. Everything here is kind of going a little bit up and down, but it's not actually that bad. And here you have a couple of knobs where you can fine tune whatever you want to kind of adjust. There's just one thing that I want to point out, and that is here the maximum delta between ears. So here is where you can actually adjust if you want to have the correction made by ear, or if you want to have more of a correction made that is more of an average correction. Now, why would you want to do that? The reason you want to do that is, for example, if you're applying that correction to speakers, and in the speaker settings, you generally don't want the right speaker just to be calibrated to your right ear and the left speaker just calibrated to your left ear. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So you can tune that in here, how much of the signal should actually go through the actual calibration of that particular side, and how much should be sort of almost like a crossover. When I'm working with speakers, for example, I usually put that up here to 50 somewhere, and that actually works fine. So the last thing that we need to do is we also need to change the audio settings, and in the audio settings you select the input device and the output device. Now this works slightly different on a Mac than it does on Windows. On a Mac it comes with its own audio device, which is called ARIA Audio VAD 2-channel, and you select that as your input device, and then you can, for example, select the whatever output device I have. In my particular case, I'm using the speakers of my MacBook. And then the last thing that you need to do is you need to simply select the ARIA Audio as your regular output, and that will then channel all the audio, all the system audio through the ARIA Studio application. It will kind of apply the calibration and then send it on to your speakers. Now, there's one final thing that I need to do, and that is actually turning on the application, and this is done by clicking on this turn on off button. By default, it is turned off, so I need to turn it on, and as soon as I turn it on, the audio is now channeled through the ARIA Studio application, and the correction is applied so that you hear it according to your particular hearing profile. Now, because of the way ARIA Studio works, you can actually chain the ARIA Studio with, for example, a mix room simulation. So if you're having a particular software that simulates a mix room, now in my particular case, what I have here is I have the Sony virtual mixing environment, and I actually did a video about that a while back that simulates our studio in our university. You can actually kind of chain them. So the way this would work is that you would first send the audio into your mix room simulation, and then from the mix room simulation into ARIA Studio to apply the hearing correction. The way to do that is simply to go into the settings here, into the audio settings. And the way it's set up here is that the virtual mixing environment expects the audio coming in at their particular studio driver. So that's the virtual mixing environment audio driver that sends the audio into this mixing environment. And then I'm simply sending the output to ARIA Audio virtual driver, and that essentially then forwards it into ARIA Studio. And then I would probably kind of go here to a headphone in order to get the correct headphone correction. Now, if you're working on Windows, the setup is slightly different because you cannot work with virtual devices on Windows. What you need is you need to have specific routing applications that can route your audio into ARIA Studio, but it's not that complicated to set up, and Altitude Audio provides you with detailed instruction on how to do that on Windows. Now, I have to say that I do have a little bit of a grievance here, because in order to be able to access the hearing profile in the ARIA Studio software, you need to purchase the full hearing test results in the Fullscale app. And this is an issue because you need to make the purchase before you can test how well the measurement you took actually works. With the hearing test app currently being in beta, this is not really an issue, since that purchase is not actually a real purchase and no money is really exchanging hands, at least not on iOS. But I wish the developers would provide an option for testing the profile before the purchase. I needed to go through 3 tries before I got good results, and that means that I would have had to purchase the test 3 times for 1 good profile. Now, on the positive side, what impressed me the most was how accurate the correction feels. In the frequency ranges that audiologists typically test, ARIA's results matched almost perfectly with my professional hearing test results. And the software intelligently boosts frequencies where you have deficiencies without making everything sound artificially bright or harsh. One surprising discovery was how well it works not just with headphones, but with regular speakers too. I initially thought that this would only benefit headphone listening, but when I applied my profile to audio coming from my laptop speakers, the improvement was actually quite remarkable. On reflection, this makes perfect sense. The software is correcting what you hear regardless of the sound source. So what is my final conclusion? Well, despite the beta stage limitations, I'm generally impressed with what Altitude Audio has created here. For anyone working in audio production who's dealing with hearing loss, this could be an invaluable tool. It gives you confidence that what you're hearing is actually representative of the full spectrum, even if your ears aren't capturing everything perfectly anymore. If you have been following my channel, you know that I'm always looking for tools that can help us overcome the challenges of hearing loss in audio production. ARIA Studio feels like a significant step forward in this space. The personalization is impressive, and the fact that it works across different listening devices makes it even more versatile. So if you're curious about your own hearing profile or looking for ways to compensate for hearing loss in your audio work, I definitely recommend checking out ARIA Studio and the full-scale hearing test application. It might just change how you experience sound. Well, that's everything for today. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button and consider subscribing for more content on immersive audio production and hearing health. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below or join our free Discord server. The invite link is in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.